Think about something you bought regularly 10 years ago. Groceries, gas, a meal at a restaurant you liked, your rent or mortgage payment, health insurance. Now think about what it costs today. You probably don't need to look it up. You already know it's more, significantly more in most cases. And you probably thought about it briefly when you first noticed, filed it away as things are expensive now, and moved on. Because that's what you do, what everyone does. You adjust, you absorb, you keep going. But here's the thing that doesn't get examined closely enough. Your income grew too, probably. Not always at the same rate as costs, but it grew. You got raises, maybe changed jobs, maybe built skills that commanded higher pay. So if your income grew and you kept earning more, why does it still feel tight? Why does the money feel like it has less room in it than it used to? Why does a salary that would have sounded like success to you a decade ago feel like just enough now? This isn't about spending more. It's not lifestyle inflation exactly, though that's part of it. It's something quieter. It's the slow, steady erosion of what your money actually means. Not how much of it you have, but what it can do. And most people feel this their entire lives without ever being given a clear framework for understanding why. Let's make this concrete. Imagine someone in 2014 earning $50,000 a year. That felt like a real income, solid, enough to cover rent, a car, groceries, some savings, maybe a vacation once a year. Now imagine that same person in 2024 earning $65,000. That's a 30% increase in nominal income over 10 years, better than many people have done. But here's what also happened over that same period. Rent in most American cities increased dramatically. In many metros, average rents rose between 40 and 80% over that decade. Grocery costs rose sharply, particularly after 2020. The same cart that cost $100 years ago now costs considerably more. Health insurance premiums grew. Out-of-pocket costs grew even faster. Vehicle prices, both new and used, reached historic highs. Childcare costs for those with young families became one of the largest household expenses in the budget. And housing prices, for those who didn't already own, moved out of reach in large portions of the country. 30% more income, but the essential costs, the things you can't easily cut, grew at a pace that consumed much of that increase. And the person earning $65,000 in 2024 is not living 30% better than their $50,000 self was in 2014. In many cases, they're not living better at all. They're just paying more for roughly the same life. This is the problem, and it's everywhere. It's in the conversation at work when someone mentions they got a good raise this year, but the rent renewal just came in and it swallowed most of it. It's in the quiet frustration of someone doing everything right, saving, working hard, advancing in their career, but feeling like the ground keeps shifting beneath them. It's in the specific American exhaustion of working harder, earning more, and somehow ending up in the same place. Not because of choices made, because of forces operating in the background, forces most people can feel but can't quite name. Here's why this is so hard to see clearly. Your paycheck is a number. It's concrete. It doesn't change until someone gives you a raise or you change jobs. But the value of that number is not fixed. It shifts continuously based on what things cost, based on what the economy's doing, based on forces that have nothing to do with your decisions or your performance. A dollar is not just a dollar. A dollar is a claim on a certain amount of stuff, and the amount of stuff a dollar can claim changes over time. This is the distinction between nominal money and real money. Nominal money is the number on your paycheck, the number in your bank account, the price tag on something at the store. Real money is what that number actually buys, its purchasing power, its ability to be exchanged for things that matter: housing, food, healthcare, time, security. Most people think about money in nominal terms. They think about whether their number went up or down. They don't naturally think about whether the purchasing power behind that number went up or down. And this creates a persistent illusion. Your income goes from $50,000 to $60,000. That's a 20% increase. It looks like progress. It feels like progress. But if the cost of your essential expenses went up 25% over the same period, you've actually lost ground. In real terms, your situation got worse, but your nominal income went up. So it doesn't feel like things got worse. It feels confusing, like you're doing fine on paper, but something doesn't add up. That's the confusion. You're measuring progress with the wrong ruler. You're watching the number and trusting it to tell you how you're doing. But the number doesn't tell the whole story. It never did. And nobody explains this to you in a way that changes how you actually think about your income. So you keep optimizing for the number, for the raise, for the higher salary, without accounting for whether that higher salary is actually buying more of what matters. Let's name this system. What we're describing is purchasing power erosion. But more specifically, it's the interaction between wage growth, inflation, and the structural costs of American life. Here's how the system works. Every year, the general price level of goods and services in the economy tends to rise. This is inflation. It's not a mistake. It's a designed feature of a modern monetary system. When inflation is low and stable, it's generally considered healthy. It encourages spending and investment over hoarding cash. It keeps economic activity moving. But here's what low and stable inflation means in practice over time. If inflation averages 3% per year, the purchasing power of a dollar halves in roughly 24 years. Money you're holding today will buy roughly half as much in 2 decades if average inflation persists. And if your wage growth doesn't exceed inflation consistently, you're losing ground, even if your nominal income keeps rising. Now, here's where the system gets more complicated. Inflation is not evenly distributed. The official inflation measures, the Consumer Price Index and related figures, capture the average price change across a broad basket of goods and services. But not everything in that basket increases at the same rate. Some things get cheaper over time. Electronics, clothing, many consumer goods. But the things that represent the largest share of most American household budgets, housing, healthcare, education, childcare, have consistently increased faster than the general rate of inflation. Much faster in many cases. And this creates a specific kind of pressure on middle-class Americans. If you're spending 50 to 60% of your income on housing and healthcare alone, which is not unusual for many families in higher cost of living areas, and those costs are growing at 5, 7, 10% per year, your effective inflation rate is much higher than the headline number suggests. Your income might be growing at 3%, but the costs that eat most of your income are growing at 7%. You're losing ground, quietly, steadily, year by year, and no one announces it. There's no moment where the system says, hey, your raise this year didn't actually move you forward. It just kept you from falling back as fast. You just feel it, in the tightness that doesn't go away, in the sense that you're working harder without getting further. That feeling is real. It's not pessimism or poor money management. It's an accurate perception of a structural reality. But there's another layer to this system that goes deeper. Inflation doesn't just affect what you spend. It affects what you save. If you have money sitting in a standard savings account earning 1% interest and inflation is running at 3%, you're effectively losing 2% of that money's value every year. You're not losing the number stays the same or grows slightly. But the purchasing power behind the number is shrinking. The money you save to buy a house in 5 years will buy less house in 5 years than it would buy today. The money you save for retirement will have less real value by the time you use it. This is what's sometimes called the invisible tax on savers. You're not being charged anything explicitly. Nobody's taking money out of your account. But the value of your savings is being steadily reduced by a force operating in the background. And most people don't feel this until it's already happened. Until the house they were saving for has outpaced what they've saved, until they reach retirement age and realize the number in their account doesn't buy what they expected it to. The system runs continuously, below awareness, reshaping what money means without ever announcing itself. So what does common financial advice say about this? The most common advice is invest your money so it grows faster than inflation. This is correct. Historically, a diversified portfolio of stocks has outpaced inflation over long periods. But this advice glosses over several realities that make it incomplete for most Americans. First, you can only invest what's left after essential expenses. If housing, healthcare, food, and transportation consume 80% of your income, the 10% you're able to save and invest isn't enough to meaningfully outpace the inflation eating the other 90%. The advice assumes a comfortable margin between income and expenses, a margin that doesn't exist for a significant portion of middle-class Americans. Second, investing requires time. The historical outperformance of equity markets over inflation is a long-run phenomenon. Over 30-year periods, it's fairly reliable. Over 5-year periods, it's not. Over 1-year periods, investments can lose significant value. If you're saving for something you need in 3 years, a down payment, a car replacement, a period of transition, the advice to invest doesn't help you. In fact, it exposes you to short-term losses at exactly the wrong time. Third, most people don't stay invested long enough for the math to work. Markets fall, sometimes significantly, and when they do, many people, especially those who can't afford to absorb losses, sell. They lock in the losses and miss the recovery. The advice assumes emotional and financial resilience that isn't universal. Here's another common piece of advice. Keep up with cost of living increases by negotiating your salary. Reasonable, important even. But here's the reality. Wage negotiations happen at moments. Job changes, annual reviews, specific negotiations. They're discrete events separated by months or years. Cost of living increases happen continuously, every month, every grocery run, every insurance renewal. You're catching up in chunks to something that's moving constantly. And the catch-up often isn't enough, particularly for essential costs like housing, where your rent is locked in for a year and when it renews, it may jump significantly, more than any raise you received in the same period. One more, move somewhere cheaper. This advice isn't wrong for everyone, and for some people, it's genuinely transformative. But it assumes that where you live is fully negotiable, that your job, your family, your social network, your community are easily portable. For many people, they're not. And even cheaper places have seen significant cost increases in recent years, as remote work shifted demand toward previously lower-cost markets. The geographic escape from purchasing power erosion is increasingly difficult. None of this advice is wrong exactly, but none of it addresses the fundamental system, that the structure of American costs are biased toward consuming income gains as they arrive, making real progress difficult without either high income or deliberate structural changes. The advice treats the symptoms. The system keeps running. Let's go deeper into why purchasing power erosion is so hard to see in real time. The human brain is very good at relative comparisons. Very bad at absolute ones. You easily notice whether something costs more than it did recently. That's a relative comparison, and your brain handles it well. But you're not good at tracking what your overall purchasing power is doing over years. That requires holding a complex set of variables in your head simultaneously. Income, costs across dozens of categories, inflation rates, interest rates, and updating them continuously. Nobody does this naturally. So instead, you use proxies. You look at your bank balance. Is it higher than last month? You look at your income. Did it go up this year? You look at your savings rate. Am I saving anything at all? These are all nominal measurements. They tell you about the numbers, not about the real value behind them. And because the numbers usually go up over time, income grows, savings accumulate, it looks like progress, even when real purchasing power is stagnant or declining. This is deeply disorienting. You feel like you're moving forward. The numbers suggest you're moving forward, but your lived experience doesn't match. The house still feels out of reach. The retirement still feels distant. The financial cushion still feels insufficient. And the gap between what the numbers say and what life feels like creates a persistent low-level anxiety that many people assume is just part of being a responsible adult. It's not. It's a perceptual gap between nominal reality and purchasing power reality, between the ruler you're using and what actually matters. Now here's the second layer worth examining. The purchasing power erosion isn't random. It's concentrated in specific categories, and those categories are structurally different from things that get cheaper over time. Think about what's gotten cheaper over the last 20 years. Electronics, significantly cheaper. A phone with more computing power than a room-sized computer from 1980 cost a few $100s. Clothing, cheaper broadly due to global manufacturing. Streaming entertainment, more content for less money than cable ever provided. Many consumer goods, cheaper due to global supply chains. Now think about what's gotten more expensive. Housing, in most American markets, dramatically more expensive. Healthcare and health insurance, consistently above general inflation for decades. Higher education, increased at multiples of general inflation for 30-plus years. Childcare, one of the largest household expenses growing faster than wages. Notice the pattern? The things getting cheaper are mostly discretionary, nice to have, enjoyable. The things getting more expensive are mostly foundational, the things you need to build a stable life, the platforms on which everything else rests. And this creates a specific squeeze. You can easily afford a better phone than your parents had, better entertainment, more variety in consumer goods, but the house, the healthcare, the education, the childcare, these are harder than they were for previous generations. And because the cheap things are visible, you have a great phone, a huge streaming library, nice clothes. It can look from the outside like you're living well, but the foundational costs are consuming income gains silently. The visible abundance masks the structural squeeze, and this creates a particular kind of confusion, both personally and culturally. People look at someone's lifestyle and assume they must be doing well financially. The signals of consumption suggest comfort, but consumption signals have been democratized by cheap goods. Almost anyone can look like they're thriving. The foundational costs, the ones that determine whether you're actually building anything durable, are invisible in those signals. So the cultural narrative says you're doing well. The numbers say you're doing okay. But the lived experience says something is off. That something is purchasing power. Here's the reframe. Your income is not a fixed amount of value. It's a claim on a changing set of real resources. And the only thing that actually matters financially is not how big the number is. It's what the number can do, what it can claim, what it can secure, what it can protect. This seems obvious when stated directly, but almost nobody applies it consistently. Because we measure everything in nominal terms. We negotiate salaries in nominal dollars. We set savings goals in nominal dollars. We talk about prices in nominal dollars. But what matters is purchasing power. Whether your income can claim more of what matters this year than it could last year. Whether your savings are growing faster than the costs they're meant to cover. Whether the financial position you're building today will actually translate into the security and freedom you're imagining for your future. Once you start thinking in purchasing power instead of nominal numbers, some things become clearer. A raise that matches inflation isn't a raise. It's staying still. Savings in a low-yield account aren't building. They're slowly losing ground. A higher salary in a dramatically higher cost market isn't necessarily better than a lower salary in a lower cost market. None of this is complicated once you have the frame. But without the frame, you're measuring with the wrong ruler. You're celebrating the number going up without checking whether the number is actually buying more. And in a system designed to consume income gains through rising essential costs, celebrating the number is exactly what the system wants you to do. Because while you're watching the number, the purchasing power behind it is quietly being renegotiated. So what changes when you start thinking in purchasing power? First, you evaluate financial progress differently. Instead of asking, did my income go up this year, you ask, did my ability to claim what matters go up this year? Did the raise outpace the increase in your essential costs? Did your savings grow faster than the costs they're meant to cover? Is your financial position actually stronger in real terms or just in nominal ones? These questions are harder to answer. They require more information and more thought, but they're the right questions. Second, you start thinking about where your money is held differently. Cash under a mattress is obviously losing purchasing power, but cash in a low-yield savings account is also losing purchasing power, just more slowly. The question becomes, where does money need to be to at least maintain its purchasing power? And where does it need to be to actually grow? This isn't a prescription for any specific investment. It's a framework for thinking about what different storage options are actually doing to your money's real value. Third, you start thinking about essential costs as the primary financial variable, not income. Most people focus on income. Earn more, get promoted, find a better job. These are valuable, but if essential costs are rising faster than income, the income focus is insufficient. The structure of your essential costs, where you live, how you access healthcare, what your housing situation looks like, what your transportation costs, becomes a primary financial lever. Not necessarily because you should immediately upend your life to optimize costs, but because understanding that essential costs are a structural variable, not just a fixed reality you inherit, lets you think about them as something you can make decisions about, deliberately, over time, rather than just absorbing whatever they happen to be and trying to out-earn them. And fourth, you develop a more realistic relationship with financial goals. A goal set in nominal terms, I want to have X dollars saved by the time I'm 50, needs to be thought about in purchasing power terms too. What will X dollars actually buy in 20 years? What costs are those dollars meant to cover? Are those costs likely to have grown faster than your savings rate? These questions might feel discouraging when you first sit with them, but they're necessary because a financial plan built on nominal numbers without accounting for purchasing power is a plan with silent assumptions baked in, assumptions that might not hold. And you're better served by seeing the plan clearly, even if it's uncomfortable, than by following a number that feels reassuring but doesn't account for the real forces at work. There's a specific kind of financial tiredness that many Americans carry. It's not the tiredness of poverty, exactly. It's the tiredness of working hard, earning more, doing the reasonable things, saving what you can, living sensibly, advancing your career, and still feeling like you're not getting ahead. Like the ground keeps shifting, like something is happening that nobody fully explains. That something is purchasing power erosion, the quiet, steady reduction in what your money means, in what it can claim, in what it can build. It happens in the background. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly reshapes the relationship between your income and your life. And most people absorb it silently, adjust, keep going, assume they're missing something everyone else knows. They're not missing something. They're operating inside a system that was never fully described to them. A system where income and cost are both moving, where the numbers can rise while the real position stays flat, where feeling financially stagnant is sometimes an accurate perception, not a failure of effort or discipline. Seeing the system doesn't solve it. There's no clean answer here. The structural forces behind purchasing power erosion are larger than any individual and not easily reversed by personal decisions alone. But seeing it clearly lets you stop measuring with the wrong ruler, lets you ask better questions about where your money is going and what it's actually buying, lets you make decisions based on real value instead of nominal numbers. And that shift, from watching the number to understanding what the number means, is where financial clarity actually begins. Not in the number itself, but in what the number can do.